deficiunt demones et quae non sunt sic temon quasi sint cuspiciende omnibus exhibiant. Demons cause things that are not, yet as if they were, to be seen by men. Welcome back to this week's Instant Book Club discussion of The Festival by H.P. Lovecraft. So the festival starts with that quote in Latin. Demons cause things that are not, yet as if they were, to be seen by men. And it's a fitting epitaph to the start of such a mind bending horror story. And that is a consistent theme with H.P. Lovecraft, which, by the way, the HP stands for Howard Phillip. And so ever since I've learned that in my head, I keep referring to him as Howie Lovecraft because it makes me giggle. And I love that idea, especially with his deep, dark, cosmic horror themes of did this really happen or am I going mad? And that's really the big theme of this particular story, the festival. Now, this is one again that I've read a few times from Lovecraft. It was one of the first stories that I read by Lovecraft, and I try to read it every winter period, either on or about Christmas time, because it takes place during the Yuletide. But one of the things that I really love about this story is this question of how much of this happened and how much of this was hallucinatory. How much did the protagonist, the narrator, truly experience, and how much did they conjure up in their own imagination? And frankly, does it really matter? If it's real to them, even if it was only imagined, does that make it any less real? So, this story follows a very sort of typical, or at least a more typical plot structure, especially compared to last week's, which is the Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, which is very sort of fairy tale, fable-ish in its design. And this is more of a blow by blow account, a more typical narrative of a young man's journey back to his ancestral home in New England, and the events of a festival that his people once celebrated, and how that festival becomes a deep, dark, forbidden, to use Lovecraft's favorite word, eldritch, evolution. So we get that, in that plot and structure there, we get that very typical narrative, I did this and then this happened and then this happened and so on, building up to a climax. And then after the climax, a resolution of the story, what happened. And in this instance, that's where this story really throws its most powerful punch, I think. We get this build of the climax, and then we get this hard cut to the future when our narrator is in hospital recuperating from these events, and frankly being told that all of this was in their head, that they had to have dreamed all of this up because the ancient decrepit village that he recalled, is Kingsport as he initially conceived it, is no longer. Modern Kingsport is modern and full of modern amenities and modern technologies. And he wakes up to the world with all of that modernness in full force. Um, Yet he gets this copy of the Necronomicon again, and in leafing through it, recalls the passages that he'd read before, and is now convinced himself that no, what he experienced was real, if somehow hidden. But we, as the reader, get this great question out of that of, well, if you imagine the whole thing, well, of course, he'd still recognize the passage of the Necronomicon because he made it up in the first place. He thought it up in the first place, and now he's just transposing that to justify his belief in this hallucination. He's getting this sort of this reinforced bias from his own uh, separate recollections of the events. And by opening up the story with that quote about hallucination and demons, um, Lovecraft really sets the stage for that question of how reliable is this narrator? Um, Madness is a consistent theme in his works. And I think that that pairing of asking the question at the very beginning, leading you on the story, and then closing, leaving that question unanswered, really gets you almost as close to experiencing the madness of this character or their inability to trust their own senses and their own mind as possible in a short story like this. I think it's beautifully done. As far as characters in this story go, we've got um, a veritable complement as far as short stories. You have your narrator that is an active participant in the plot, if passive in most of the decision making. Um, you have the old man who is never named but is ever present as sort of a guide and then ultimately a shifter, shapeshifter sort of archetype toward the end of the narrative, something that's hinted at the very beginning with the blandness of his expression and his immobile face. We have the old woman that's more of background, almost to personify the agedness and the level of decay of the town itself. She's almost like the personification of the time period in some ways there. Um, and then we have other creatures that are described. The unseen entity on the settle that the main character never sees, or the our narrator never sees within the house, but that spirits itself out the window. And I personally believe that that entity is the same one that he encounters again playing the flute down in the depths below the church during their Yuletide rite. Although there's nothing in the story to necessarily require that those are the same creature, they seems to fit narratively, at least in my mind. Um, but of all the characters in here, the narrator is the most complex because we start this story from a place of obligation. He's going to Kingsport as a requirement of sort of honoring his ancestors, of honoring the culture and the people from which he came, um, and he's he's almost reticent. He's nervous to be to be doing this, and he grows more nervous, not just of being an outsider, but of the strangeness and the unfamiliarity of this what appears to be a decrepit and um, ancient version of Kingsport, a New England town still stuck in the 1600s. In fact, everything that he describes of the town initially is rooted in the 1600s. Um, and as a character, he just kind of follows along this path, watching, but really only participating when he's directly invited to do so, and then following the steps that are transcribed, that are prescribed for him. Um, it's an interesting approach of this um, very passive character who sort of plods along until the climax, where he really makes his first decision of the story. We hint, or let's just say, H.P. Lovecraft Howe hints partway through at the threshold of the church, one a a hesitancy in this character when he's determined to be the last one through, and two, uh, creates in that one obstinacy, uh, the realization that this isn't necessarily a passive narrator, but he might actually engage with this story at some point, that he might actually engage with the events that are going on other than just sort of going with the flow. Um, but he does. He does go with the flow through most of this until we get to that final climax where he realizes that the old man is not, in fact, a representative of his people, but is a demon, for lack of a better term, an otherworldly entity, and rather than go forth and participate in this ongoing charade, the narrator throws himself into this oily black water that could go anywhere. He hopes out to the sea eventually, although the sea during the winter in New England is no joke, cold in the extreme, and is only really saved by chance. But we see this decision, this life or death choice of either go with the demon and become a part of um, this supernatural perverse congregation, or uh, give yourself over to uh, nature and God, for lack of a better term, and hope that it sees you through. So it's an interesting character, boiled down to a singular character choice, um, which I think is a trait of good short fiction, really narrowing that scope down to one real decision. Um, Lovecraft's writing style is, again, I say again, compared to uh, Poe, it's less flowery, but it's certainly much more in the way of purple prose than a lot of modern literature would uh, uh, would be willing to venture. But I think that some of that does come from Poe. Uh, Good old Howie said many times that he was inspired by the work of Edgar Allan Poe, and you can feel some of that in this story here, especially with some of the descriptions uh, of the cult down below. You know, terms like the uh, let's see, what's the it's the not the gangrenous, it's the oh the viscous vegetation with glittering green in the caloric glare. Wow, what a mouthful of description right there. I mean, that is description that has body. You can sink your teeth into it. I mean, you can feel that on your palate when you say that. And a lot of his verbiage, a lot of his prose throughout many of his works, but especially in the story, is very much like that. There's meat to it, um, and and you can find yourself chewing on any particular sentence for quite some time. Um, Although he does occasionally break it up with some shorter, uh, more staccato sentences in there, which keep it from becoming entirely monotonous with this very flowery speech. But it's a meal for a short story in terms of prose. It is a meal. Now, setting is something that Lovecraft does exceedingly well. I think he sets moods, an atmosphere through his settings, um, as I mean, almost as a fundamental um portion of his style. You know, where some other authors will leave much of the setting of the imagination. They'll describe uh, um, only specific details, dropping in a note here and a description there, and and a smell here or something like that, just to give you just a hint of the surrounding, just a hint of the setting. But for Lovecraft, atmosphere is everything. Um, we can't get that creeping sense of looming insanity, of real threat and danger without the atmosphere here. Um, this story wouldn't be the same if the village had been celebrating Christmas as usual, and there had been garland and singing and carolers in the streets and roaring fireplaces, but describing the uh, the the overhang of the buildings. It makes the streets seem claustrophobic, of describing the fallen snow with no footprints. It makes the place seem empty, haunted. He does a marvelous job, I think, of using the scene to set atmosphere and tone and really make setting build the tension. Because we don't get a lot of emotion from our narrator here. They get comments about being nervous. They get comments about being uneasy or unsettled. But really, it's the description of the monotonous stone descending down the spiral staircase beneath the tomb that's below the church into the subterranean vaults, and using all of what surrounds the narrator, all that is external to the narrator, to really build that tension of the story. It's something that he does very well, and it's one of the reasons I like reading Lovecraft. Um, he's another one that pacing um, is a real hallmark of his better writing. Again, this is a story that if it didn't have a slow burn, a slow build, it wouldn't nearly have that effect. This sort of creepiness needs time to worm into you. And Lovecraft, I think, does an excellent job of that, of very slowly adding in the details that are unsettling, building upon this world brick by brick without rushing over any of the details, so that it's a slow, creeping approach to this ultimate dawning horror. And you can see that in the actual writing here. If you look at his paragraph structure, um, notice that he writes in these big blocks of text that that physically slow you down when you're trying to read it. They don't lend themselves to being scanned or zipped through like a lot of dialogue would, or the way that very uh, short paragraphs, tight sentences allow you to get that sensation of speed as you read through the work. It feels like every step has weight as you read through each block of text. And his world building in here, although minor compared to um, more fantastic horror stories, um, still is really useful in setting um, the tension and making this seem a deeper world. It also helps slow that story down, the action of the story down just a little bit to help build that uneasiness. Um, it takes a break from the action of him, of the narrator showing up at the house, uh, and instead of being whisked right off to this festival, there's a period of time where he gets to sit and just read and let that fear blossom to nurture the reader's apprehension, um, as everything in this house, right down to the books, is unsettling and mind bending. So, another thing that Lovecraft does really, really well in this particular story. Um, in terms of the point of view here, uh, one thing that I like about this story compared to the story we read last week, again, that's The Mask of the Red Death. Um, and I very much enjoy The Mask of the Red Death, but there is as I mentioned, a dreaminess sort of quality to that story where you're kind of disembodied for any particular character. And I personally really like horror stories in short fiction, especially where we are in a particular character's head. Um, you know, one singular focus as opposed to multiple points of view. Because I think that that constriction of the aperture, that ability to only have access to one individual senses, reminds the reader, certainly reminds me, that there's so much else happening at the peripheral of the narrator's vision beyond what they can see. And Hitchcock would tell us, it's the monsters that we don't see that are the most frightening. So by keeping that focus narrow and hinting at all the things that are on the edges, it gives space again for that unease, that unsettling feeling to grow that would be wiped away if we had scenes from our narrator's perspective. We had scenes from the old man's perspective, scenes from the old woman's perspective. We'd get too much of the worldview for this kind of story. So I really like that very narrow first person aperture. It feels very immersive, and it's very easy to feel the discomfort that the character's feeling. Um, in terms of character development, this is one where I think we see a fair amount of character development. Um, from being a very passive young man to one that is willing to risk his life um, over a singular choice, um, is I think is very dramatic, and I think it's part of the reason why this story works. You get some short stories and some novels to that end where the characters start, as one person, and then by the end, very little has changed, or they've come full circle, and those, to my mind, are not nearly as satisfying. And in short fiction, sometimes it's hard to have those dramatic changes that we get in novels. I think it's part of the reason why so many more people read novels than short fiction. But here we get that very clear, very dramatic change in the characters' personality and worldview. Um, in fact, their own agency and their own life, which again, I think adds a lot of strength to this short story. I like that a lot. Um, Yeah, so that's pretty much my thoughts on the festival. It's a very creepy, unsettling story of cosmic horror, from the master himself, H.P. Lovecraft, beautifully crafted, beautifully built, and one of those stories that I can read again and again and again. So, with that, thank you so much for joining me for this week's Instant Book Club discussion. If you've been enjoying these, please give this video a like and remember to subscribe so you never miss a post. And I will see you next week. The end. Thanks for listening. Before you go, I've got a question for you. Do you like dark fantasy fiction? If you do, check out my Kindle Vella series, The Tyranny of Fate. It's heavily inspired by D&D, the Cthulhu mythos, epic adventures like the Stormlight Archive, Edgar Allan Poe's gothic horror, noir mysteries like Sin City and the Maltese Falcon. It follows former soldier and fugitive Okimata Ramsey. Haunted by a betrayal he knows he'd commit again, Okimata wants nothing more than to escape his past. But when bounty hunters show up to collect his reward, he's forced to throw his lot in with a divination cult bound for the far west. It's a choice that has repercussions that span all of existence. Check it out now on Kindle Vella. New episodes drop every Saturday, and you can read the first 3 episodes for free.